Hi guys, my name is Jess. Welcome back to my channel, Books Past Bedtime. So today we are going to be doing a booktube classic, the worst books that I read in 2020. I have a list of 15 books here that I'm going to share with you. Not all of these books are inherently bad. Some of them made it on the list just because they were simply disappointing to me. They didn't necessarily live up to my expectations of them, and they might have got 2 or 3 stars from me. They're not bad. Objectively, none of these books are bad. Well, maybe some, but anyway. There's been a lot of controversy around these worst book videos here in BookTube, not necessarily from people on BookTube, but more so like authors and other people and people that think that their opinions are worth hearing on Twitter. So I was a little hesitant to make this video, but I think it's gonna be okay. Like, this is my channel. This channel is for other book readers. It's not for authors. And regardless, these are simply my opinions. They are not constructive criticism for the authors. These are simply the worst and most disappointing books that I personally read this year, and I just want to share them with you because this is my channel and that's what I feel like doing, and I can do whatever I want on my channel. So without further ado, let's just hop right into it. I am going to be going relatively in order, so I'm going to start with like my 15th worst / most disappointing book and then work my way up to my like very most worst disappointing book that I read this year. Like my top 5 are probably the like worst books I read this year, and then everything from like 15 to 5 are just mostly disappointing. So that's the tea on that. That's what's going on. Let's just hop right into it. So the very first book on my list is The Guy on the Right by Kate Stewart. I read this book when I read Chandler Ainsley's Favorite, so I will link that in the cards above if you are interested in hearing more of my in-depth thoughts on this book. This is an adult romance story, and it is basically following this guy and this girl who meet on like a dating app, I believe, or something. This girl is like the girl of this guy's dream, but then he finds out that she is like got a thing going on with his roommate or something. That's pretty much it, I think. I don't even really remember what this book is about because I blocked it out. I just didn't really like the main character. I thought he was very much like stereotypical, like the Reddit thread r/nice guys. Like the main character belongs on that Reddit thread. He was just very insufferable and very like pick me, like I'm better than everyone. Why does nobody see that I'm better than everyone? I'm such a nice guy. Why do no girls like me? Blah 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 blah. Like he was very annoying. And the main girl character was just kind of forgettable. I didn't connect to her very much, and I didn't really like their romance. And this book had that stupid 3rd act miscommunication thing that I just don't like. Our main male character, he just like freaked out way overboard, and so much so that he treated his love interest so badly that I did not want them back together in the end because I just thought he was an idiot and terrible, like a terrible human being, and I didn't want them together anymore. And when I don't want the main couple in a romance book to end up together anymore, it's bad. And this book thus ended up on my list of the bottom 15 books I read this year. Sorry, Chandler. The next book I want to talk about is The Love and Lies of Rukhsana Ali by Sabina Khan. I read this book during my sapphic reading vlog that I did a couple months back, and this was my least favorite book that I read during that vlog, and it mostly was just very disappointing to me. Our main character comes from a very conservative, traditional Bangladeshi family, and this isn't a problem other than the fact that she is attracted to girls, and so when her mom walks in on her kissing her girlfriend, all hell breaks loose. Basically, her mom sends her to Bangladesh and tries to arrange her marriage and is very, very abusive to her, hires an exorcist, locks her in a room, takes her phone away, cuts her off from things, threatens to not allow her to go to college. It was a lot, and then in the end, everything was wrapped up with a nice little bow very quickly. I'm not an Own Voices reviewer in terms of the Bangladeshi representation, so I don't want to say that this book is inherently bad. Like, the representation in this book is great. I really enjoyed learning more about the culture, but I do think that for LGBT teens reading this book, it's a little bit dangerous because I think it just really too easily forgave the parents' mistakes. And like, obviously it's everybody's personal choice on whether they want to forgive their parents or their family or their friends or whoever if they have been wronged by them. It just was a very, very high level of abuse and a very, very easy forgiveness. And I just think that we shouldn't normalize queer teens being treated like dirt by their families and then forgiving them so easily. I just think that's kind of a dangerous message to be putting out in some aspects. So I do think there are some really good aspects to this book, but that was just something that I really couldn't get over and that I really take issue with this book. So ultimately I was pretty disappointed by this one, and I think I only gave it 2 stars. The next book on this list is The Gravity of Us by Phil Stamper. This is a queer young adult contemporary and one of my most anticipated books of 2020, but unfortunately it really let me down. I think I hyped it up way too much in my head is part of the problem, and it just didn't live up and couldn't live up to that hype. But this book follows our main character, who is kind of like a social media influencer in a way. He does like news reports on Instagram Live. I've never seen anybody do that before in my life, but you know, whatever. Adults understand social media apparently. Regardless, his dad is selected to go to this like space training program, and so they moved to Texas, and he's really bummed about that. But once he gets to Texas, he meets one of the families that is already there, and they have a son, and they fall in love. And this just disappointed me because it read pretty young, which is my own personal preference. Like, that's not a knock against this book, but I just found it to be too young for me to connect to. I found the main character's voice to be annoying and frankly unrealistic, and also the romance was very insta-love and very quick. They were like willing to throw their whole lives away for each other 2 days after they met, and I wasn't a big fan of that. And I just found myself rolling my eyes at a lot of the things that happened in this book. I didn't feel like I had a character that I was rooting for. I didn't really love the plot. This book really just fell short for me. This is the definition of a disappointing book. There's really nothing bad about it, but it just wasn't the book for me. This next book also pretty much perfectly fits that definition of a book that was just simply disappointing, and that is The Fascinators by Andrew 𝗬𝗓𝗄𝗡. This is a YA queer magical realism / fantasy that follows this group of kids who all can do magic. They live in Atlanta. Magic is pretty common in this world. Some people have like innate abilities to do magic and are better at it than others, but you can also practice magic and get better at it. And then some people just don't do magic, but I don't really remember. But basically it's about this group of friends. They all are getting ready to go to college. Some want to go to magic colleges. They're in this magic club together. There ends up being this like evil cult group that one of their friends gets inadvertently involved in, and they have to extricate their involvement from that cult. So this book was another one of my most anticipated reads of 2020. I was really excited to get my hands on it, but it unfortunately let me down just like The Gravity of Us. I had two main gripes with this series. One is that this year I've just found that I don't like the trope where magic exists in our modern day world. Like, they were living in Atlanta in America in the modern day. Everything was the same except for the fact that there was magic. I just don't like that. I don't like when everybody knows about magic. I don't like when magic's just like a commonplace thing. I don't know why. It's just not something that I enjoy reading about. So that was a problem that I had with this book, number one. And number two, it was very rushed. There was a lot of plot holes. There was a very big lack of development, both in characters and in plot. I really didn't understand the characters' motivations in this book. I didn't understand why things happened the way they happened. And the ending was very, very disappointing. I really thought that we would have more of a resolution and our characters would have redemption arcs, but really it just kind of ended. And it was very disappointing and not what I wanted or expected out of this story. And so it's possible that my expectations were just out of whack, but I do think that this book could have been done a little bit better at the same time. But overall, it just was a really disappointing read for me. And so that is why it's on this list. The next book I want to talk about is Always Never Yours by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. So I read If I'm Being Honest by this author duo earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was really good. I gave it 5 stars actually. So I was really looking forward to picking up the rest of their backlist, but this one unfortunately really disappointed me. This is a YA contemporary romance, and it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet retelling. Characters in this book are also doing Romeo and Juliet as their school play, but our main character, Megan, is very much like a serial dater. Like, she dates a lot of guys. She never really stays with a guy for long. She also is an aspiring director, so she wants to direct her school play, but then she ends up getting cast as the lead. She gets cast as Juliet, and she then meets Owen, who is also in the play, and starts to fall for him, but Owen has a girlfriend, and also Megan isn't really like a long-term commitment kind of gal, but they end up falling for each other. So my really main gripe with this book is that it involved cheating, and I just hate a cheating storyline. I just hate it. Even though they're in high school and their lives are messy, yeah. It's just something that really bothers me. It's not something I want in my fiction. I don't want to read about people cheating on each other. And so that was really the main reason why I didn't like this. I did like the main characters and I liked their romance aside from the cheating. I just couldn't get over the cheating, and I can just never get over the cheating. And so that's why this one really disappointed me. I just wish that books could create conflict without falling back on cheating. I know it's something that happens in real life, but that's why I don't want to read about it. Next on my list is actually a series of books, cheating a little bit, but who's making the rules? Me. So next on my list is the Selection series by Kiera Cass. So many of my friends here on BookTube really love this series, so I'm very sorry that it's ending up on this list, but I just really was not a huge fan of this. This is a YA dystopian romance that takes place in this futuristic world, this futuristic America, where every generation the queen or the princess is selected through this like bachelorette-esque competition, and our main character America is selected to be in this competition and compete for the prince's heart, and so she goes to the capital and does so. This first book is pretty fun. I think when I read it I gave it 4 stars. I'm not really sure why. I think it's more of like a 3-star read. It was fun, but it wasn't anything revolutionary. Most of the characters just annoyed me, but then the series like just got worse as it went on. Like I think I gave this one 2 stars and this one 1 star. The one I gave 1 star. I just had quite a few issues with it. Number one, I personally don't really like The Bachelor. I don't watch The Bachelor. I don't know about it. And the reason I don't watch it is because I don't like the stupid petty drama that's like put upon fake. And that's what this whole series is about. It's about the drama. And I just was not here for that, you know? So that was one reason I didn't like it. Also, America is insufferable and she's very hypocritical. She gets upset with Maxon, who's the prince, for being with the other girls that are there in the competition, but then she turns around and is macking on her boyfriend from back home who's a guard in the castle. And I just didn't like that hypocrisy. This book is also kind of weird because they try and throw in this weird like rebel dystopian war storyline and it just goes nowhere. It just really fizzles out. It's like, why even include that? It should have just been left out, you know? So overall the series was disappointing. Wasn't a fan and I'm probably going to unhaul these. My next book on this list is This Time Next Year by Sophie Cousins. This is an adult contemporary romance following this girl, Millie, who is a baker. Millie has this whole backstory where she was born on New Year's Day. Like she was one of the first babies born in London. Well, she was actually the second. The first baby was this man. He wasn't born a man, but he is a man now. And anyway, it was this whole debacle. Like he got the prize for being the first baby born in the new year, whereas she was second place. And so she's always kind of felt like she's second place her whole entire life until she meets this man again that beat her to being the first baby born, and they like form this friendship and then this romance. The reason that I read this book at all is because I requested it on NetGalley because I thought for some reason that it was sapphic. I think because the characters' names are Millie and Quinn, so I just assumed Quinn was a girl. I don't know. I don't know why I thought it was sapphic. I don't know who told me that, but anyway, that's why I requested it, and that's why I read it, because I felt like I had to because I had it on NetGalley. If it weren't for that mistake on my part, this book probably would not have been read and thus probably would not have made its way onto this list. So for that reason, I very much apologize because I was not the target audience for this book. That aside, I did not like this book. My number one reason I didn't like this book was that it was very, very slow. It's marketed as a romance, but it's more of like chick lit. I hate that term, but I don't know how else to describe it. Where it's just like fluff. It's just like a fluff book, and it's just following Millie and her bakery and her bad life and her negativity and blah, blah, blah. There's no romance until like the last chapter. It was very dry, to be honest with you, and boring, and I just really wasn't a fan. So I'm very sorry, but I did not like this book, and it is ending up on this list, even though it's really not the book's fault that it ended up on this list. Next is a book that I think is probably going to end up on a lot of people's most disappointing books of the year list, and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the Hunger Games prequel following President Uranus Snow. I don't remember what his name is, but it's something like that. Anyway, when I heard there was going to be a Hunger Games prequel, I didn't want to read it because I figured it was going to let me down. And I was right, so I don't know why I didn't just trust my intuition. But here we are. This is a honker of a book. Nothing happens. It's very boring. Literally, Suzanne could have written anything. Like, she could have written 𝗪𝗪's games. She could have written Joanna's games. She could have written a Finnick and Annie love story. Literally anything. And she chose to write about President Snow. Why? Literally why? That's the only question I have, Suzanne. Why? Tell me why. Because this was not it. The next book on this list is The Drowner. I think it's by James MacDonald, but if it's not, I'm sorry, it'll be on the screen. I don't feel like looking it up. This book is bad. I read this for my video where I read the 8 books featured in the 𝗕perfect Murders book. I ended up not liking a lot of those books, but this one was very much the worst. I don't even know how to explain this book. There's basically this Jesus freak girl who's really good at killing people, and she likes to drown them. Maybe I should look this up. Do you want a better summary than that? I can't find it because it's in a obscure book. Anyway, this book was very sexist, and when it wasn't offensively sexist, it was boring, so I just didn't like it. Do I have more articulate thoughts than that? No. You want to hear me scream about it? You can go watch that video, the 8 Perfect Murders video. Next book on my list is Little Rex by Meredith Miller. This is a YA magical realism story. I just read the description in here and I don't know. I also read this book this year and I don't know what it's about. I think it's like a feminist thing, and I think that these girls are just pushed a little bit too far and then they burn everything up. I really don't remember reading this book. I really don't. But I remember not liking it. I gave it 1 star when I read it, so it ended up on this list. I wrote a scathing Goodreads review, so I'll just read that to you. Honestly, not a fan. This book just floated by with lyrical, metaphorical writing and no real substance or concrete plot. The characters were annoying and pretentious, and so damn similar that I could barely tell the 3 of them apart. They were so similar. And it all just felt too unrealistic. Unrealistic teenage dialogue, unrealistic parental relationships, unrealistic plot, etc. Bleh. So those are my thoughts. The next book on this list is We Are Totally Normal by Raul Kanakya. I read this book in the spring, I think, of this year, and I was really disappointed by it. This was another one that I was really very much anticipating. It was on my list of most anticipated reads for 2020, and I was just ultimately let down. This basically follows this main character named Nandon, who is questioning his sexuality. He struggles with internalized homophobia. He meets this guy named Dave, and they kind of get into this weird relationship. And there's a lot of good in this book. There's a lot of good representation, and there's a lot of good topics that are brought up, but I just don't think that this book dove into them fully enough. I think they put too much on their plate, and it just ended up being messy, overly complicated, and ultimately unsatisfying. I think it really had the opportunity to discuss internalized homophobia and what it means to question your sexuality and not necessarily know what label to put on yourself. And while all of these topics are very relatable to queer people, I just feel like this book didn't handle them very well. I was left feeling very unsatisfied and honestly angry when I stopped reading this book. And just the pacing and the way things were organized when the ending came, it didn't make sense to me and it wasn't satisfying to me, and I did not like where it went. The book also glossed over being outed, which I didn't appreciate because that's such a serious thing, and I feel like some of these books just take that very lightly, and I just think whenever that happens to a character, it really needs to be questioned and like clearly stated that that's wrong in some way. Well, I think that this book had a lot of potential. For me, it was not successful, and I ended up really not liking this book at all, which is why it's on my top 5 worst books of the year. Sorry. Number 4 on this list is One Day in December by Josie Silver. A lot of you probably know that I really hated this book this year. So this is an adult romance book following our main character, and one day on the bus, she sees this beautiful man. He's like her dream man. She thinks they're gonna get married. They have this instant connection, but then she gets off the bus, or he gets off the bus before they can talk, and so she spends like the next couple years like looking for him everywhere until one day her best friend introduces her to her new boyfriend, and it's this man, and she's like, what the heck? And so ensues a tumultuous love affair with a lot of fucking cheating. And we've already discussed previously how much I loathe cheating, and this is cheating that happens everywhere. Every single character in this goddamn book cheats on somebody, and I mostly just hate that the girl valued her relationship with this man over her relationship with her friend. She was willing to steal her best friend's boyfriend. She was willing to kiss her best friend's boyfriend. Screw the consequences, and I just don't like that. I don't want to read about it. Please get it away from me. I really hated this book. The next book I want to talk about is The Careful Undressing of Love by Corianne Haydu. I read this book when I read my bottom lowest rated books on my Goodreads TBR, and this was one of those books, and honestly, rightfully so. So this is a YA magical realism story following this group of characters. There's like 4 girls, I think, and 1 boy, and they all like possess some form of magic. No, they live on this street in New York City where if they fall in love, the boy that they fall in love with will die or something. So they have this curse floating over their heads. They can't ever fall in love with anybody, and they like live in fear and blah, blah, blah. I actually really, really liked this book up until the last couple chapters. I thought the writing was really beautiful. It definitely is flowery. Not everybody would like the writing, but I really liked the writing. And I also really liked the characters. It just felt very whimsical and fun. But then the ending, I just was not a fan. In order to escape their curse, all of the girls commit suicide. And it is very much idealized, and I just don't think we should be idealizing suicide in any form. It should not be a beautiful thing that we promote. So, not a fan of this book, and it deserves being in the top 3 of the worst books I read in 2020, I'm sorry to say. Number 2 on this list is The Wives by Taryn Fisher. I very recently read this book. I don't think the video where I talked about it is out yet, but I just had to throw it in this video because I absolutely hated this book. This is an adult thriller, and it is about this woman who is married to this man who's polyamorous. He has 2 other wives. She is trying to deal with her feelings of jealousy over them, and she's trying to be like the best wife so that she can be like the number one. The rule has been all along that the wives don't know who each other are, and she starts to break those boundaries and meets the 3rd wife and finds out she's pregnant and all this stuff. Things just spiral from there. The reason I had such a problem with this book is, number one, I really just hate the trope of the unreliable narrator, and that's very much what this story is about. The big twist is that we find out that she's just actually mentally unstable, and none of the things that she thought were happening were actually happening. She thinks that they are, but everybody else around her is telling her they're not, so we don't know whether to trust her, whether to trust everyone else around her. And that brings me to the second point of why this book is so high on my list of worst books that I read in 2020, and that is because the twist in this book relies on mental health issues, and I just really do not feel comfortable with any book that does that. I just don't think that your thriller should rely on the trope that women are crazy and that people are just psychotic and don't know what's going on around them. I just think that's kind of a dangerous trope to be promoting in thrillers, and it's not my favorite thing out there. I think it's kind of problematic, and that we as a book community should kind of unpack that a little bit more and maybe like be like, hey writers, stop doing that. It's not cool. So I really did not like this book. Even beyond that, I just didn't really like the story very much for personal preference reasons. Again, I don't like the cheating. I thought the 3 wives thing was kind of weird. There was a lot of gaslighting and abuse of women in the story, which I didn't like. There was a lot of things negative about this book, so it is thus the second worst book I read in 2020. And drumroll please, the moment you have all been waiting for, the very worst book that I read in 2020 was Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. To tell you I hated this book is an understatement. Basically, this is an adult romance book. It follows our main character 𝗎𝗎. She's really got her life together, but then she stumbles upon Elliot, who was her first and only true love. And so it's kind of a second chance romance. It alternates between then and now timelines. We get their backstory, how they came to be, and then we get their now interactions, trying to figure out if they want to be together again and just reform their relationship. And it was all well and dandy. I didn't love the slow burn. I'm not really a huge fan of second chance romances, but that's not why this book is number 1 on this list. The reason this book is number 1 on this list is because of the conflict that is revealed at the end of the book before our characters are like set to be together. This is going to be spoilers, but everybody else that has read this book loves it, but I really fucking hated it. Spoilers. So the reason that 𝗎𝗎cy and Elliot broke up back in the day was because Elliot had sex with another girl while he was so drunk that he allegedly thought it was 𝗎𝗎cy, but really it was another girl. So, rape. And like, yeah, the person he was having sex with should not have had sex with him. Like, that's really disgusting. But he's also very much not innocent in that situation either. He called 𝗎𝗎cy up and was like trying to gaslight her on the phone before this all happened. And then he got really drunk. He was being a shit. And so 𝗎𝗎cy felt really bad, and she left the party, the family party that she was at, to go and like ask him to forgive her for whatever she did, even though it was nothing. And she finds him having sex with another girl, and he's like, oh my god. So the whole situation is fucked, honestly, and I hated it, and I just thought it was bad and gross, and Elliot was the fucking worst. Like, if I've ever wanted to kill a love interest in any book, it is this man. He was so fucking terrible. I hated him so much. So I just frankly could not root for this romance because 𝗎𝗎cy was way better than him. She did not deserve to be with scum like him. So that's the tea on that. I hated this book. It was definitely by far the worst book that I read in 2020, and I'm sorry if you love it. I just could not get over that weird drunk sex cheating rape scene. Terrible. Awful. Like, why would you put that in a book? I don't know. So on that note, those are the 15 worst/most disappointing books that I read in 2020. Let me know what the most disappointing book you read in 2020 was. I would love to know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you being here. If you made it all the way, give me the emoji of like the person going no. So yeah, thanks again for being here. All relevant links will be in the description. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.